Jenkins, three, right wing to win it. He made it. He made the three from the right wing.
The long desperation by Dagger. Oh, my!
Hello and welcome to another edition of Rise and Fire Hoops Talk. Clint Schweitzer, Noah Groniger. We have a big show today because we're going to be talking about the number one team in America, the Gonzaga Bulldogs.
Woo! I can feel it.
If you're a Gonzaga fan, you might as well just stop, buckle up, and enjoy this ride with us because we're going to be talking with Gonzaga broadcaster Matt Santangelo. Of course, he was on the original Elite Eight team back in '99, and this is just going to be an incredible opportunity for us to talk some Zags, baby.
I see you've taken advantage of me once again and put up a UConn jersey. You mentioned Matt Santangelo, the last team that got to the Elite Eight. We could have got to a Final Four if not for Khalid El Amin, who ruined us. Yes, thank you very much for that. So.
Well, maybe this is a different Gonzaga team. We're talking about the number one team in America. For the second time, Gonzaga's ranked number one.
We've been down this road before. It didn't go well. This one, it's got to be our time.
Well, the college basketball is it's been a strange season. You've had Duke having the problems they are with Coach K on the shelf and the Blue Devils losing some games. You've had Kansas go roughshod the last week, beating Kentucky in Rupp Arena and then a win over 20-1 Baylor. So Kansas is right there.
Kansas fan Dick Vitale was having a great time last night and enjoying it all.
I'm pretty sure that there's a version of hell that includes Dick Vitale's voice being the soundtrack as I'm sitting there being pummeled by stones in the head.
Rock, chalk, hey, you.
Well, Kansas is very impressive. They have some of the best guards in the country. But to me, Gonzaga is the most well-rounded team in the country. What do we say? 7 players averaging at least 8 points for this team.
Yes.
I think that this Gonzaga team is different. We've had Seth Greenberg on this show talking about Gonzaga. He says they're different. We're going to see what Matt Santangelo says coming up as they get ready to play BYU. And they've got St. Mary's, a team that's still very much alive in the West Coast Conference as well. But it's not about this. It's not about the West Coast Conference. It's not even about the West Coast Conference tournament. NCAA tournament coming up March is where Gonzaga's going to make or break itself, and that's what we're all interested in right now.
We are. I mean, this has got to be the team to finally make it back to the Final Four. We've got Shemet Karnowski. We shouldn't have him. He had that back injury, so he got a medical red shirt, and he's back now, and he's dominating down low. We've got the Zach Collins, Killian, Tillie, the transfers, Nigel Williams-Goss, Jordan Matthews, and Jonathan Williams III. I mean, this team has got it all. They're very balanced. Like we said, the numbers bear themselves, and this has got to be the team to push through and finally get them to the Final Four.
Well, it could. There's a lot of talented teams out there, but they're talented teams that are losing. We saw Florida State, North Carolina start to separate themselves in the ACC. Both teams losing games.
Yeah.
We talked about Duke and the troubles they've had. Louisville was a team early in the season that's kind of... So at this point, you look to the SEC, a conference that Gonzaga has a big win over Florida.
And Tennessee.
Florida, Tennessee, South Carolina, Kentucky, Arkansas. Maybe you get 4 of those teams in the NCAA tournament from the SEC. Kentucky right now is very close to losing 3 straight games. They just barely snuck by Georgia after losing 2 straight to Tennessee and Kansas.
Yeah.
So, around the nation, we always talk about teams like Gonzaga. Well, you know what? Once they get to the NCAA tournament, the talent they go up against, and yes, Kentucky's very athletic. You got Malik Monk, Kerryon Fox, those guys you have to deal with, and there's no doubt about that. Even if you play a Duke, that's a lot of McDonald's All-Americans. But if ever there was a team to do it, I think that the 2017 Gonzaga Bulldogs might be the team that can do it. They're number 1 right now. Congratulations to them for that. I hope they can keep it up because it's good for college basketball to me to have a team like Gonzaga. You can't help but cheer for them. They're a team that Mark Few, he does it the right way. He recruits, he recruits with a lot of transfers, but brings over a lot of guys overseas as well. That's an advantage
Tommy
they have.
Lloyd, their assistant coach, is huge with that. He goes overseas. He finds these guys, the Shemet Karnowskis of the world, and they just keep restocking, refueling, whatever you want to call it, rebuilding. They just keep doing it, player transfers, and this has got to be the team. And you look at a Baylor, a Kansas, a Kentucky, a Duke. They've had their struggles throughout the year. They're not these dominant teams that we see in the past, the dominant Kentucky teams. Yes, there's Malik Monk out there dropping 37 against Georgia, getting hot, can shoot it from anywhere, can shoot those threes, drain them from anywhere. But I like Gonzaga's balanced team and their presence down low. A lot of college basketball teams don't have that in this day and age.
It's gone away from it,
They have, and Gonzaga just has numbers down there, not just one guy. They've got 3-4 guys that can go down there. So I like them in this tournament, and I think they can do something.
Well, you got a team like Kansas playing with 7. That's if they aren't popped for another incident in between now and their next game.
Vic Bragg, who's next?
Well, it's been kind of an ordeal down at Kansas, and I'll tell you, there's a theory out there that the NCAA just won't go after their blue bloods. And I think there's something to that. We saw what happened with North Carolina and academic fraud, the NCAA. There's still nothing has really come from that. Kansas is out there potentially maybe covering up some of these deals with a domestic incident with Vic and then Bragg and these 5 players involved and witnesses.
Possible rape of a 16-year-old girl.
But they won't go after them, will they? They just let it go. It's just these kids need basketball, right?
Well, not until we have a charge in our hand saying this player's being charged for this, this, and this. Until then, free play. Let's go. I don't care the evidence in front of me until I see a charge. Until the police have you in handcuffs and are dragging you away, kicking and screaming.
And I think that's terrible.
You are a Kansas Jayhawk.
Kansas has been known over the years. Brandon Rush was admitted to that school with a 0.0 high school GPA. You had Darrell Arthur never passing a single high school math class. They somehow get him in. Kansas has been doing this for years. There's no secret. That's how you operate as a blue blood. But you know what? A team that does it the right way. We talked about the Gonzaga Bulldogs, and it's our pleasure to go ahead and welcome our very special guest this week on Rise and Fire Hoops Talk. It is Matt Santangelo. He's one of the Zags that got this whole thing started back in the late 90s. He's now a broadcaster for the Gonzaga Bulldogs as they get ready to take on the BYU Cougars in Provo, Utah. Joining us right now is Matt Santangelo. Matt, how's it going? How's everything going, my man?
Everything is going so well. Thank you for having me on the show. We are, people that are familiar and close to this one are really excited for this game just because of the venue in Provo and all the energy around, being number 1 in the country. It's going to be a great night.
Yeah, number 1 in the country. I mean, how good does that feel as a former alum, as a as a current broadcaster for the Gonzaga Bulldogs, heading into Provo, Utah, a team in BYU that's still trying to get. I mean, I don't know what the chances are with their conference record, with a solid overall record, a chance to get back into tournament contention, possibly if there was going to be a third team out of the West Coast Conference. How are you feeling about things? Excuse me, as regards to being the number 1 team in the nation. It's a great feeling, and then taking on this BYU team that's desperate right now.
Well, I think to address the first one first, the number 1 team is really a feather in the cap. It is something that this program, it doesn't set as a goal. It's not an expectation around Zag Nation to be 1 in the country, and frankly, it's not that even the coaching staff is necessarily externally excited about. They're appreciative of it, though, and so I think it creates a lot of excitement. It's great to have the Gonzaga brand and the program being discussed, all over the country in college basketball. But what it does, especially in the West Coast Conference, is anytime you show up to a gym and you have that Gonzaga on the front of your jersey, you usually have a pretty big bullseye on the back of your jersey. And now that bullseye, that spotlight, that target on the back is even brighter now that you have the number 1 in the country ranking beside it. So I think, for teams like BYU who are seeking that signature win, this is a huge night for them. I mean, nothing sweeter than to give the last unbeaten team in the country their first loss and to knock them off of the pedestal of the number 1 ranking. And I think that's where they're trying to really find some fire and some motivation. I mean, there's going to be 20,000 screaming fans in the Marriott Center tonight in Provo. It'll be as tough a place to play as any place in America, without question. And that's the kind of adversity that Gonzaga brings, and like I said, it's a little bit more intense now with all the success they've had this year.
Oh, definitely. We got a fan question here, Matt, from Nate Thomas on our Facebook page, and he asks, what qualities does Mark Few possess that allows him to consistently get so many guys from all over the world to buy into his system?
Well, I think it's really just kind of he treats his players like young men, which they are. He gives them a tremendous amount of off-the-court flexibility. He treats them. He just has a mature approach. You can really see it with this particular team because they really have done a nice job of executing the game plan, game in and game out. And then there's a certain characteristic about being a Zag that really kind of self-recruits, if you will. I mean, the fact that Nigel Williams-Goss, McDonald's All-American, when he was considering that transfer, they leaned on the freshman Josh Perkins and said, "What is that like for you?" And Josh Perkins, of course, said, "I'm all in." He signed off because he knew he had known Nigel, and that history of including the players in the recruiting process has been going on since I first came to GU back in the mid-'90s.
Wow.
And probably long before that, where if there was a player on campus, it doesn't matter how good he was, if the locker room stood up and said, "Coach, this isn't a Zag," then that player didn't get recruited. And I think that Coach Few, and before him, Coach Munson and Coach Fitzgerald, even when it really got started, allowed the players to really have a say on what type of team, and it just kind of created a culture of, shared values and like-mindedness and a toughness and an appreciation that have kind of, helped carry that kind of recruiting message throughout for them to continue to get such high-level talent and guys to really come in and buy into what it means to be a Zag and go out and win a lot of basketball games.
Well, speaking of one of those guys with high-level talent, Killian Tillie, what's his injury update? We haven't really heard anything. What's the status on that? What is it, and how long is he going to be out?
Yeah, well, I think it's a game-time decision. He was back in practice this week. We saw him after the first game. He was in the walking boot. He got out of that relatively quickly. The next game he sat out. He was out rebounding for the guys before the game, and then he practiced this week. So we're fully expecting him to be, a game-time decision, but out there active in uniform, and then just seeing kind of how it warms up and loosens up. So he should be back. It's one of the luxuries with this team, the depth that they have, that they were able to take one of the freshman talent and really take his time to get back so that it doesn't become a lingering issue or injury throughout the rest of the season.
Another one of the young studs that Gonzaga has, Rui Hachimura. What have you seen in his development? Do you see him having a bigger role down the stretch and heading into March Madness?
Rui is one of our favorite guys to talk about. He is such a he has such a great smile and kind of charisma. And when he first showed up, you were kind of always had some some talk about how much he was actually learning the language and the culture. I mean, what a shock for him!
Sure.
Not only to come play Division I basketball, but to be on the stage that that the Gonzaga University provides. I mean, it's fun to watch, and he continues to certainly make great improvements. I mean, physically, I don't think there's a question, or anyone will question his physical capacity, his athleticism, what he can do ball handling wise. I mean, it looks different. He's really a graceful athlete, an explosive athlete. But the game is different, and especially at Gonzaga, because there's a lot of sophistication to the system. That's why GU is always one of the highest offensive efficiency teams in the country, is because there are it's read and react, and it's a lot of kind of nuances in how they approach things. It's sophisticated, which makes it the cultural shock even harder for Rui. But he has definitely shown improvement. He's gotten a few more minutes here and there, of course, in some of these games where the margin of victory is so strong. Coach can give him some extended minutes, but it remains to be seen if that's in a game like tonight that it looks like there's going to be a little bit more adversity, a little bit more back and forth, a little bit maybe more evenly matched. Rui may not see the floor, and that's okay. He's a freshman. He has to see these things first and learn through it all as a part of kind of his maturation process.
Well, a player that we covered very closely here in the state of Missouri is Jonathan Williams, who started his career at Missouri, was a good player on a really bad team here at Mizzou. He goes out to Gonzaga, making a very nice impact, averaging 9.6 points a game for the Gonzaga Bulldogs. How do you see his role as this season plays out? He just made a wonderful impact, I think, and been a tremendous role player for this team. And what do you think, as far as what you heard, what do you think the problem was at the University of Missouri? Was it a simple fact of I want to win basketball games? And he's definitely doing that now. What are your thoughts on Jonathan Williams?
Well, I think so. J3 is a beast. I mean, there's no doubt about it. He's really fit in well and made a huge impact. He got off to a little bit of a slow start this year as he was adjusting to, again, the level of play, a little bit more. He wanted to do everything so right that I think it slowed him down a little bit. He kind of fought with foul trouble through a few games, and then really it was the New Year's Eve game. It was a road game at Pacific in Stockton, California, that he took a hard foul and I kind of joked that it quieted his mind, and then he just became the Jonathan Williams that everyone expected, because since then he's been on just a tear. I mean, he just brings another level of physical play, of athleticism, of toughness to this group, and he's super efficient around the basket. He's eating up all rebounds now, and he has the best highlight dunk so far of the year. So I mean, he is really. It's been fun to watch him develop throughout this year, because he's been playing as well as anyone here since the New Year, for the month of January. And I think he'll continue to be a huge factor for this team. He sets the tone, him and Shemek inside. especially, with Zach Collins coming off the bench, the freshman phenom, and then with Tillie, depending on how his ankle reacts, you got plenty of qualified guys to eat up the extra minutes, because I know those 4 inside are all hungry for extra minutes. So he's been great, and I think the transfer from Missouri, I'm not as familiar with the reasons why, but he just wanted to get into a situation where he's going to have a chance to win games. I think that's ultimately what it was, and that's what Gonzaga offers all of the athletes that have come through here, is a chance to play for championships, year in and year out. And that's not, it's rare. It is really rare. And I think that, like I said, those players sometimes recruit themselves to Gonzaga because they want to experience, what that's like. And of course, this group is taking it to new heights.
Yeah, and winning games they are. This is the second time Gonzaga's been ranked number 1. They always seem to be a popular pick to make the Final Four. But do you think this team has something different, something special, unique, that makes them different than those teams in the past, that can finally push them through to that Final Four?
I do. I think there have been teams in the past that have been capable, and there's expectations around it. But you know how March is. It is a crazy, crazy month, and there's just it's one possession here, a turnover there, it's a made shot there that really alters the course of history ultimately. And Gonzaga has been on both sides of that. They've been on the ones that history is going to look very favorably, and they've been in a couple ones where they look back and kind of scratch your head. I think this group, we don't know how high the ceiling is for this particular group because of their talent, their versatility, their athleticism, their size, and that they play well together. I think they have a chemistry that is, I think, really, really unique, and I think that can carry you through so much adversity. And they're going to be tested tonight. Tonight's going to be a fun one because some of the West Coast Conference games, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They have huge margins of victory. They're dominating every facet of the game. But those games have been blowouts. And so I think tonight will be one of the games that you kind of watch and say, okay, what happens when, if things don't go your way, or those 20,000 fans are coming down on you, or, Emory gets hot from 3, or and so I think those things are always going to be interesting to see. And I know the national narrative around the number 1 ranking is really fascinating to me, because the Gonzaga, the program, has not done anything but gone out and win basketball games, and then all these other people vote them number 1 in the country, and then they start to tear them down right away. All the reasons why they shouldn't be number 1 in the country, and you kind of go like, well, they didn't self-elect themselves. You guys made them number 1, and now you're saying why they shouldn't be number 1. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
And so, with this particular group, and they've shown great maturity throughout this year. I think they kind of appreciate the attention, and I think they wanted to be number 1. They're comfortable being number 1, but it's just a small factor in what their preparation is, their day-to-day life, as far as what they're doing to prepare for BYU, and then after BYU to prepare for Santa Clara, and so on and so forth. They've done a nice job of just going one game at a time, focusing on the task, and really going out and executing the game plan.
Well, when you look at Gonzaga, and this is going to be the 19th straight NCAA tournament appearance for the Bulldogs, and an amazing feat. Of course, you were on the first Elite 8 team, and where do you see this program on a national scope? Because it's kind of hard to compare, maybe due to the conference they play in, maybe due to the fact that a lot of the games are on late. West Coast teams, especially on the East Coast and the Midwest, you just don't see them maybe play as much. Where do you see Gonzaga on a national scope with regards to some of the other big programs? Because this is 20 years of this, Matt. This is not a Flair. This is not a George Mason Final Four run. This is 20 years. Where do you see this on the national scope, and where should they be?
No, I think that's a fair question, because I think for people on the West Coast, there's definitely a tremendous amount of respect, because there is no other program out west that really has had. You look at Arizona, UCLA really has even potential, and not even in UCLA hasn't had that longevity in the modern era of that type of success. Arizona may be the only other one. So I think on the West Coast there is that sense of recognition, like, man, they're good, and they're good every year, and they recruit well. It's good athletes. They're well coached. They're competitive. There's an appreciation. Then you start to move east a little bit, and you get to the Midwest, and I think there's an appreciation. When we first started going here back in '99 and 2000, we were everyone's second favorite team, And that was kind of the, you know, what it was. It's like, hey, you're loyal to your school, and you're loyal to, you know, maybe your alma mater, your family's team. But your second year, like, the second is kind of America's team. The second favorite team was always Gonzaga because of the underdog nature of what it started out as. And now it's not so much underdog. But I think as you continue to move east, it starts to become just a cute story. Like, it's just kind of a pat on the head. Oh, that's really great what Coach Few has going on out there. And yeah, but, you know, they're no Duke, or they're no. Now, of course, this is all Duke people on ESPN saying this stuff.
Right.
So kind of ironic. But, you know, but it's kind of cute. There's certainly respect for the consistency in the year in and year out. But as far as being a serious contender, you know, I don't really feel like that is part of the narrative. And frankly, you know, maybe that's part of Coach Hugh's resume, is to finally break through that, you know, that wall and get to a Final Four, and then that discussion maybe changes a little bit. But right now, especially because of what I said earlier around the number one ranking, and, you know, everyone votes them in and then starts to tear them down. It's like, gosh, you know, like, why vote them in if you don't believe it? And keep moving, you know, keep voting in the Blue Bloods, and we'll just continue to go up in ball games, because that's what Gonzaga's done for a long, long time now.
Yeah, and you mentioned there's Duke people out there on ESPN saying things, and Gonzaga, it's a cute story, but they just kind of push him to the side. Recently, Jay Williams, former Duke player, came out saying that he didn't believe Gonzaga could make that Final Four, and it's not about this team versus past teams. It's really about the conference they play in, not being challenged for months and months, and then just versus teams that are being battle-tested night in, night out into their tournament and bigger conferences. So what is your response to Jay Williams for what he said against our Gonzaga Bulldogs?
Yeah, and I think it really is a great point. And I think, you know, one, the West Coast Conference isn't as bad as people perceive it to be. It's a high IQ, high skilled conference. You know, going to these roads, some of the gyms may not be as impressive buildings, but when you have, you know, 5, 7, 9,000, in tonight's case, 20,000 people who really want to see you lose, then those places become a lot harder to play. You know, apathy isn't one thing that happens around Gonzaga University basketball. People care, you know, one way or the other, which is really, really cool. But I do agree, and I think with this group, with you know, to Jay's comments, you know, I don't know if this group knows what their ceiling is either, because they haven't been pushed there. You know, we all can assume like but they're doing everything that they can. You know, they're not like, had they gone to Pepperdine last week and won by 12 on the road, you'll go like, oh gosh, you know, they didn't play up to their level, but they went and won by 50. You know, like they're doing everything that they can do, you know, to push themselves. But there is that question mark around, you know, it wasn't Kansas, Kentucky over the weekend kind of thing, and what does that look like? Now, however, you start to look at some of the preseason battles, the Arizonas, the Tennessees, you know, and those games that
Iowa State, Florida,
Florida's, the Iowa States, you know, then all of a sudden you start to say, well, wait a second, we actually have those on the resume too. Now, why doesn't Gonzaga get credit for those in November and early December before they get into conference? So I really do appreciate what he's saying, because I like him. I kind of fancy myself a competitor, and you don't really know what you got until your back's against the wall, and you got to decide: are we going to come out swinging, or what are we going to do? Like, how do you respond once you get knocked down? How do you get back up? I think those are really, really valuable lessons in the whole kind of competitive journey. And this particular group, with games like tonight, when they go to Moraga in a couple weeks, or next week, those are going to be as tough games as anyone plays in the entire country. And so those are the battle-tested, you know, environments that Gonzaga can pull from if, you know, when they get into March and they get into other adverse situations.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see. We will, of course, be watching and listening to your broadcast here as the Gonzaga Bulldogs take on the BYU Cougars. I tell you what, Matt Santangelo, can't thank you enough for joining us here on the Rise and Fire Hoops Talk, talking Gonzaga, talking about the number one team in the nation, and I hope we can have you on later in the season where we're still talking about the number one team in the nation. Matt, have a great call tonight, and thank you so much for joining us, my man.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Anytime I'm happy to do it.
Thanks. It's always an honor, Matt.
All right, thank you.
Thanks to Matt. Incredible insight, kind of echoing some of our previous sentiments about this Gonzaga Bulldogs team, and he's as close to the team as anyone. It's going to be interesting to see. This is going to be a fun ride coming up through February and March, no doubt.
I mean, this Gonzaga team is just amazing to me. I'm a fan. I've been a fan since I watched their run, Matt Santangelo's run in 1998. But this team just, okay, Matt Santangelo, Richie Fahm, they have something, and then players see them make that great run, and so they get a Dan Dickow transfers over from Washington.
Just builds.
And it keeps going and
That's
going.
important.
So these players, they feel like they're part of this current team, and they're Zag, and they help build this and make this what it is today. And so it's an unbelievable community up there Gonzaga has of just players and just feeling a part of this team even after you graduate and leave this university and go on and do other things. People just keep coming back, flocking back, and staying around and wanting to be a part of the university, coming back, playing in Santangelo's tournament they have up there, the alumni games. It's just an amazing thing that they have up there. I never thought when I went to Happy Times t-shirts and had my mom make me a Gonzaga t-shirt, it was a light blue with white letters. She got it wrong. I was very upset. She didn't get the color scheme right. But I had a shirt. It said Gonzaga. I wore it proudly in 8th grade, and I loved it, and I still have it. And this team just makes me so proud. I couldn't have dreamed that it would come to this.
Glad it has, and I'm going to be cheering for this team going forward myself. And I tell you, we can't thank you guys enough for joining us, for listening to Matt Santangelo. Please tweet us at GASN Sports. If you want to see a future guest come on here, we do all college basketball, NBA. This is Rise and Fire Hoops Talk. We do it all. So tweet us. Our website, gasnsports.com. It's all right there. All of our shows are archived, and we pretty much do it all. Do we not?
We've got articles up there, some rankings. Everybody loves those. And just our videos. Just if you want to see this, we do a lot of other shows. Check us out there, gasnsports.com, at GASN Sports. And subscribe on YouTube.
Subscribe on YouTube. Subscribe on iTunes. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Rise and Fire Hoops Talk out.